Okay. Maybe it's something to do with the cables under the Pacific.
Maybe. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for joining us for our fortnightly members forum. We're excited because we have got Brett West. He's online with us today. And I'm not going to really waste too much time into further introducing him because I think we all know Brett. He's been with the company now since 1997, I think. I might be right.
That's correct.
Yep, and he's been a key part of the research team. I think we've all reached out to him on several occasions for some advice on Noni, and we've read all the articles that he has published. I know that there's been a lot of questions come through, and we've already given those questions over to Brett, so he's going to try and cover them today. And at the end of it, we will open it up just for some questions towards the end. Okay, so if you have a question, hold it, or you can type it into the chat box, and we'll bring it up and ask Brett at the end. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Brett.
Okay, good morning, Australia and New Zealand. I'm happy to be able to talk to you this morning or this afternoon. At my part of the world, it's this afternoon, and it's yesterday in reference to you where you are. But like Sarah said, I've been doing this since 1997, and let me invite you now. If you can't hear me very well, just send a message in and say we can't hear you, and then I'll try to speak up a little more or get closer to the computer. I've been told I'm naturally soft-spoken, so just bear with me on that, and bear with my Yankee accent. Hopefully it's not too much trouble. But I did get some questions, and I'll try to address some of those as we go along, and I will do more than just answer the questions. I'll give you some additional information, but I'm going to answer one of them right off the bat, and that's, does the body build a resistance to T&J after continued use? And the answer to that is no, it does not. It's a good question. I know there's some herbal products that and some other medications and so forth that the body seems to build a resistance to over time. And later on in the presentation, if I have enough time, unless I get really long-winded, I'll show you some results of a population study we did in Japan, and we looked at the effects of noni intake, iridoid intake on advanced glycation end product levels. And that's, of course, many of those consumers in Japan had used that for many years. So, and then the second question I'll take care of right now is, if the juice is expired, is it still safe to drink? Well, that's a little bit of a, depends, I guess. What did you do with it is the question I would have. We guarantee the juice for 2 years, as long as it's been sealed, and the bottle, the seal's intact and the bottle's still good. If it's been opened up and left out for 2 years, and under what conditions, I can't answer that, but it's good for 2 years. And after the expiration date, we know that a lot of the phytochemicals such as iridoids are still there, and you could probably push a little past that. We don't guarantee it though. So again, we don't know the circumstances, and so officially, I would say we guarantee it to 2 years, and past that, it's might be okay, might not be, depending on what you've done with the bottle. So fair enough. Hopefully that's fair enough there. I'm going to share some slides here, a PowerPoint presentation, if you don't mind. It might be better to look at than my face the whole time, so we'll go along with that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share some stories about my experience. I know our IPCs like to talk about how they were introduced to Tahitian Noni Juice, and I'd like to do the same a little bit, if that's all right. So we'll do this, and I think we're still here. So I've been doing this research on Tahitian Noni Juice for more than 2 decades, and I started in 1997, like Sarah said. And the first place that I learned about Noni Juice was while I was a graduate student at the University of Arizona. And during that time, I was studying pharmacology and toxicology. And Arizona is a lot warmer than Utah in the wintertime, and my wife's sister came down to visit us. And I wanted to get out of the snow and the cold. And she had started working this was in 1996, and she had started working with this new company that sold a juice with a funny name. And she tried to explain to me what this juice did and some of the science behind it. But now here's the problem. I love my sister-in-law. She's a good woman, but she was not a scientist. And the explanation she gave to me was kind of mixed up. She had talked about some of Ralph Heineke's zeranine research and Annie Hirazumi's research in the immune system, and kind of got the stories crossed. And what she explained to me and how she explained it with this mixture of research sounded pretty impossible to me. And so my first exposure was that I thought this was kind of a crazy company, crazy product. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting and really something. So I did some additional research. But again, my first exposure to it was not overly impressive, just because of the science background I had, and then my sister-in-law trying to explain that to me, and it didn't go off so well. Well, it turns out my wife did use the Tahitian Noni Juice. She's more open-minded than I am on a lot of things, and so she gave it a whirl. Our first child was born while I was in graduate school. She used it to help her recover after delivery of our son. And she said, hey, this is good stuff. And so I was a little more open-minded to it. But then I finished up my graduate research the next spring, and I was looking for what I would, at the time, would term a real job. You know, I was looking for all across the United States for some opportunities for work. But then one opportunity came up that was kind of intriguing. Stephen Story, one of the founders of Morinda, I had been put in contact with him, and he talked to me about doing research with this new company. And I thought, okay, I'll hear you out and hear what you have to say. So he offered me a position with Morinda in St. George, Utah. Our lab was there at the time. And you're going to see somebody in the background. Just ignore the staff here. It's one of our researchers here. And anyhow, he offered me the job here in our lab in St. George, Utah. And I actually had some chances to do some real research on the juice, on Tahitian Noni Juice at that time. Our first laboratory was in this nondescript building here, this little, what we call strip mall here, and a few office spaces. And we turned this office space into a laboratory, punched a hole in the roof and put a fan on top for a lab hood and so forth, and started doing research. And at the same time, when I was hired, I was hired to work under a man named Jara K. Jensen. He was Morinda's first research and development director, and he didn't have anybody to direct when they first hired him. So I was hired as the first directee, the first person to take orders from him to do research. But I told him I would work for him, and I was open to giving them 1 year. I would work for them just 1 year to see if there was really something to this Tahitian Noni Juice. And as you might be able to surmise, I've been here for more than 20 years. So I did find some things that are really, really good. And that's why I've been here so long. Some of the first projects I worked on were to determine if something called damnacanthol was in Tahitian Noni Juice. Now, those of you who've been around a while have heard this term before, and we know it was in the roots, and it had some real good health benefits, but we wanted to find out if it was in Tahitian Noni Juice, and we found out that it's not in Tahitian Noni Juice, but there are other good things in Tahitian Noni Juice. I also did a statistical analysis of customer testimonials. At the time, Kelly Olson was having people send in their experiences with Tahitian Noni Juice and what it did for them. So I compiled this information and categorized it according to health effect, and then I compared it to the ethnobotanical literature. You know, the ethnobotanical literature, that's the publications of the scientists who went around the world studying plants and how people use them. I wanted to compare the current claims for Tahitian Noni Juice against the ethnobotanical claims, because this was all pre-marketing. So there was no communication, and there was no bias from people talking. There were people in the Caribbean and people in the South Pacific, other places that were using the fruit for health, and they weren't talking to each other. They came up with these uses all on their own. So I wanted to compare and see how they matched up. I found out that they actually matched up very, very well, that a lot of the claims that people were saying that Noni Juice was good for matched up with a lot of these historical uses. So that was very convincing to me. Another one was, early project was establishing a bunch of quality control tests for noni seed oil using something called FTIR. And we had this very precious oil, and we wanted to make sure that the groups we were working with that were producing it were making good quality oil for us, and we weren't being cheated, the customers weren't being cheated, that nothing was being harmed with this. We wanted to make sure that everything was done right. And so I was in charge of overseeing the quality control tests of that. We had a quality control director at the time, but we were the research people to find out what it is that we really needed to test. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to drink some water as we go. I'm at the end of my day here. So I got to stay a little hydrated while I talk. Utah, as you know, you've been here, it's kind of like out in Western Australia, and we're dry. So we dry up a bit. But I already explained this part. This is a little bit about how the ethnobotanical reports and the customer testimonials matched up greatly. Now, there's one thing at the beginning that was also very helpful to me. My wife had been a volunteer doing some welfare service work in the Dominican Republic, and that's on an island, Hispaniola, in the Caribbean. She had been a nursing student and was out working with people, trying to help them with improving health conditions and so forth. And she knew a family that lived out in what they call the Campo, out in the countryside. And they couldn't afford modern medicine, so they used plants. And she thought at the time, this was kind of a voodoo medicine type thing. She felt bad when she visited the house one day and they had headaches, and the mom had a headache, and they had this leaf wrapped around their head. And she thought, oh, well, these are poor people, superstitious. Too bad they don't have money for something that can really treat the headache and the pain. But then when I started working for Morinda one day, we had some leaves shipped in from Tahiti to do some research with. And the leaves were shipped wet. The staff in Tahiti didn't think about drying them out and so forth. So they came in wet, and that's going to damage the leaves if they're shipped wet that far. So we're in St. George, Utah, out in the desert. We figured we can dry these leaves out really fast. So we took them out of the packaging and put them on these rocks next to our lab out in the summer heat and let them dry out. And then my wife came to pick me up after work. And she looked at those leaves and said, I know those leaves. Those are the leaves that people were using in the Dominican Republic. And so that was confirmed kind of the traditional uses there that I was reading about, and made it more personal for me. Again, excuse me if I dry up a little bit. Sorry, Sarah, too. I had to do some talking earlier, and like I said, it wears me, the voice and the throat and so forth get down a bit. But there was some research done by Dr. Furusawa and Annie Hirozumi at the University of Hawaii that also convinced me in the early days about the health benefits of Tahitian Noni Juice. In fact, we hired Dr. Annie Hirozumi to do immune system research with us. We were able to make some new discoveries there, and about how Tahitian Noni Juice really does impact the immune system, and we published some papers on that. I'd like to just review a few interesting things you may already know. Seeing some of you people here I've seen over the years, you probably already know this. The noni fruit there's been interest in noni fruit over the years with various governments. One of those is the United States government, and during the Second World War, they had this technical manual produced that outlined which plants you could eat and which ones you should avoid should you be marooned on an island somewhere in the Pacific. And of course, noni was listed as an edible fruit, and the leaves were listed as edible as well. The name Morinda citrifolia actually describes what the plant looks like. So Morinda means mulberry-like. If you look at a picture here, you can see the mulberry fruit and how it kind of looks sort of like a noni fruit. And so Morris and Morinda means mulberry-like. Citrifolia means citrus-like leaves. So a picture here of the citrus leaves of the lemon, and they look very similar to the noni leaves. So that's what Morinda citrifolia means. It means it's a mulberry-like plant that has citrus-like leaves. Now, noni was used throughout Polynesia quite a bit, especially before the European era. In fact, a guy named Dr. Art Whistler was an ethnobotanist at the U.S. National Tropical Botanical Garden in Hawaii, had written a book called Polynesian Herbal Medicine. This guy's an expert in Polynesian herbal medicine, and he's had books that summarize all the uses by the Polynesians throughout the whole Polynesian Triangle, or the Tongans or Samoans and so forth. And he pointed out that noni was the most widely and commonly used medicinal plant prior to the European era, when they started bringing in other medications and so forth. So it was a really important plant, had a lot of wide benefits and a lot of uses. Some of the interesting phytonutrients in the noni fruit, iridoids, very unique for a fruit to have iridoids. And it has a lot of the, it can explain a lot of the effects of the noni fruit and Tahitian noni juice. There are also things called medium chain fatty acids, caproic and caprylic acids. These two things do have effects also, but they are responsible primarily for the aroma of noni. So, you know, up in Queensland, way up in the north, and then, you know, where noni grows along the coasts and so forth, there's one record where it was called cheese fruit, and that's because of these two fatty acids that are more characteristic of strong aroma cheeses. Gives noni its flavor and its aroma. There's something called decatrienoic acid, which is also very unique for fruit to have. There's things called hydroxycinnamic acid derivatives that have health benefits, and lignans and scopoletin and flavonoids and carotenoids. And there's more than 275 of these phytochemicals, phytonutrients in Tahitian noni juice. 275 is actually a very conservative number, but you know, we know of many more than that. We've completed a lot of research since the early days of Morinda. We've published more than 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications that have been done by Morinda's research staff, as well as collaborating scientists at universities with work that we funded there. We've done a lot of work, been able to get a lot of approvals throughout the world for safety, and also, you know, places like China, where Tahitian noni juice is officially a functional food that supports the immune system. That's an actual claim we make on the label there, because we've done the work for it, and the government's recognized that, and we're allowed to make that claim there. Those of you who've been here, you know that we've done a lot of this work in our laboratories. We've spent a lot of resources in doing this research to validate the benefits of Tahitian noni juice and the ingredients that go into Morinda products. It's important to us to make sure that we have legitimate products and things that deliver real benefits. Some of the examples of the clinical trials we've done, just listing here. You know, we've done the safety clinical trial. Those of you who remember, we've done a lot of work in DNA protection with heavy smokers, those who smoke more than about a pack of cigarettes or more a day, and the effects it has in protecting the DNA from damage, and also the antioxidant effects there, as well as some of the effects they have on the blood lipids like cholesterol and triglycerides. And work's been done with joint health, the neck, and endurance in athletes, but also endurance and improved energy in other people as well. Those things that we call quality of life factors, such as has been done with postmenopausal women and others who have other joint issues. We've done this work with people who've also didn't have any specific health condition, and see that there's antioxidant benefits and immune system benefits there, and quality of life benefits, etc. Now, last year, we published a paper that reviews a lot of these clinical trials on Tahitian noni juice, and I put a link here so you can find a copy of that if you haven't already. So far today, there's been almost 4,000 people who've downloaded a copy of this article. That's a pretty good number. We'd like to see more than that. You know, it is a scientific and technical thing, so we understand that not everybody can understand it, but we try to present all this information so people understand there's credible science behind Tahitian noni juice, and there are real benefits. So one of the questions that was asked is, of all your studies you've done what are the most positive effects that Noni has always shown to improve? There's been a bunch, so I guess I could answer that in more of a systems of an answer. So systems of the body. So I would say that as you can read in this review paper, that it's these very powerful antioxidant effects that Noni has, that Tahitian Noni Juice has, and its interaction with the immune system and inflammation pathways of the body, that it's really provides an explanation for a lot of the benefits it has. So it's hard to narrow it down into one condition or one symptom or something like that, because it actually involves these three major parts of the functioning of the body, and how it benefits the body in so many ways through doing that. So again, antioxidant, immune system, and inflammation reactions and processes in the body. They're all interrelated, and Noni helps with that. So hope that's a decent enough answer for you. Now again, if you read this review paper, you'll learn a lot, and hopefully it'll be informative for others that you want to share this information with as well. So just to review some of the studies here, we'll do that. I'll take another swig of water here, and then I'll talk about some of these clinical trials. So the safety trial, this was done with 96 people, and this was done as part of our effort to get approval of Tahitian Noni Juice as a safe novel food within the European Union. In 1997, the EU passed some laws that said if a food is new to Europe, it has to go through a safety assessment. So we went through this process and did a lot of preliminary toxicology research, and then finished it up with this human trial. We found that basically you can't drink too much Tahitian Noni Juice. That's the summary of this study. You know, everything that could be measured, we measured on people drinking Tahitian Noni Juice, and they were drinking up to 3/4 of a bottle a day and still found nothing. One thing we did find is that there was some evidence of health benefits. Even though this was designed for safety, we saw that the number of people who are experiencing what we call adverse events, meaning somebody who would catch a cold or have a headache or so forth, you record all of that stuff. The people drinking Tahitian Noni Juice were actually experiencing less of that than those who were drinking a placebo. The placebo had the grape and the blueberry juice. I actually designed that myself. It had in there the grape and blueberry, and I put in a cheese flavor. You remember the caproic acids I talked about? I put in a cheese flavor to mimic that, and use that as our reference group. And so people drinking Tahitian Noni Juice were healthier, and there was no adverse effects there. So that's kind of one I like to lead with to help people understand, you know, this is good, safe stuff, and it helps your body in many ways, but it doesn't do any harm. Another one we did, we had done, I mentioned Dr. Annie Hirazumi's research earlier on the immune system, and we did a study in China. Again, we were getting approval for Tahitian Noni Juice in China as a functional food. So not just that we're bringing it in and selling it as a juice you can drink, we actually had to prove to the government that it does something for your health to be able to sell it through our direct sales network marketing model. And that's the laws they had. So we targeted the immune system because we had so much research there. But here's an example of one of the studies, and these were people that were healthy people, just regular healthy people. And we saw that drinking Tahitian Noni Juice, this was a 2-month study, one of our smaller pilot studies, but we saw that drinking Tahitian Noni Juice lowered the oxidative stress in the body by 19%. And, you know, that would just, the oxidative stress would probably come from just breathing the air in the cities. You know, there's pollutants in the air and so forth, and that can cause a stress on the body. But we also saw that it increased the adaptive immune system by 32%. We measured something called IL-2. And that the adaptive immune system is the part of the immune system that has memory. So immunizations use the adaptive immune system to give you an idea. When you're exposed to something, your body remembers how to respond. So it helped improve that. We also saw that it increased the activity of what's called the innate immune system. and that was through natural killer cell function. Now, the innate immune system is the part of the immune system that's always there to protect the body and ready to act, and is ready to immediately respond to threats. Kind of think of it sort of like, over you had in Australia, you had a guy named Ned Kelly. I guess he was this outlaw or bushranger, and he wore this, this armor. Well, think of the innate immune system as sort of like Ned Kelly's armor, but better, because I understand Ned Kelly still took some bullets, but this would be better. And then Tahitian Noni Juice helps improve the innate immune system as well to keep you protected. So those are some benefits there. Even if you're not sick, Tahitian Noni Juice can help you stay healthy. That's the benefit here we're seeing from these types of studies. Sarah, you're going to have to flag me a bit too if we get on too far. We got 10 minutes? 8 minutes? Okay. Once I get going, I lose track of time, so sorry. Here's an example of one benefit to the joints. And this involves the neck joints here, the cervical spondylosis. So this was done in University of Lagos College of Medicine in Nigeria. They did a large study there with 90 people that had this condition. A lot of physical, difficult, lifestyle, very, very physical, using a lot of their joints and wearing them out. And so these people had stiffness, and they had stiffness when they would flex and extend their neck or move things around. And so they had limited range of motion and pain. And so they did a study where they combined Tahitian Noni Juice, or they tested Tahitian Noni Juice alone. Then they did the standard physiotherapy or physical therapy to see how they compared. And then they combined them together and found that Tahitian Noni Juice was very effective in helping and improve the health of the joints in these people, and helping them have greater range of movement. Along the same lines, we did a study at the University of Illinois College of Medicine, and also the Swedish American Hospital in conjunction with the university there, and we did what's called an open label study. There was no placebo. We just gave the juice to people, but followed them. This involved 82 osteoarthritis patients, and they drank 90 mils of Tahitian Noni Juice per day. And it also had benefits on the joints, the hip and the knee, and improving those, and also improving quality of life factors. They had more energy and so forth, and better mood along with that. And they, as we did with the safety study, of course, they drew blood and looked for markers of liver function and kidney function and so forth, and found that it was very well tolerated, very safe, as expected. Now, we did a lot of work with heavy smokers also at the University of Illinois College of Medicine. And in these, we found that Tahitian Noni Juice had really strong antioxidant effects, even compared to the placebo, especially compared to the placebo, which had healthy fruit juices in them. Again, grape and blueberry juice, known for great antioxidant activity, but it kind of came down to, we're going to test this not in a lab tests. I've done hundreds of antioxidant tests in the laboratory. I know how to do that, but I know the limitations as well. And this one is sort of where the rubber meets the road. What does it do in real people with real exposures to things that can cause oxidative stress in their body, such as cigarette smoke? We found that Tahitian Noni Juice, even while they continued to smoke, had a great impact on lowering the free radicals in their body and the resulting DNA damage that comes from those free radicals as well. So that's to kind of summarize a lot of those studies that we did. Like here, there's something called aromatic DNA adducts. That was one type of DNA adduct that formed directly from the chemicals in the cigarette smoke. A direct acting chemical reaction causing DNA damage, and Tahitian Noni Juice helped protect against that with just even as little as 30 mils per day. And that's continued while they continued to smoke as well. We also saw a benefit on the cholesterol and triglyceride levels and something called C-reactive protein, which is a measurement of systemic inflammation. Since Tahitian Noni Juice was helping protect the body against this stress from the cigarette smoke, it had other downstream benefits, such as in these blood lipids here. It's helping protect the liver and those things that are involved in controlling these and regulating these. So it helps the body stay healthy and stay in the normal healthy ranges. And we also saw that when we tested this with people who didn't smoke and had already existing healthy levels of these blood lipids, it didn't change those. So it wasn't like a drug effect, which would push those down. You know, if you didn't need them pushed down, then you don't want them pushed down. And if you take a drug and you don't need it, it's a bad thing. But with Tahitian Noni Juice, it was just normalized the body. And so if you didn't need this effect, you wouldn't get it. But if you did need this effect, you would see it. So it's what we call an adaptogen type effect, where it helps regulate the body. It helps the body take care of itself. Again, the DNA adducts, this was the type related to the oxidative stress. Of course, if it has strong antioxidant effects, it would protect the DNA from the oxidative products produced by the cigarette smoke reacting with the cell membranes and so forth. Now, with endurance, we know that noni fruit had been used traditionally by Pacific Islanders to, they take the fruit with them on long fishing trips and voyages to help keep their stamina up. And we did some studies where we investigated the effects of Tahitian Noni Juice in athletes. And one of these was done in Moscow, Russia, where we took 40 athletes and highly trained athletes, runners. We saw that when they drank Tahitian Noni Juice, and this was compared to a blackberry juice, which had antioxidant benefits, at least in the laboratory, but Tahitian Noni Juice was much stronger, and it increased endurance by 21%. And that was associated with a antioxidant activity increase of 25% that you could measure in the blood. So that antioxidant benefit helps with endurance and energy, stamina. A follow-up study to this was done at the University of Port Harcourt. This involved, again, athletes, 60 people. They did this, what we call a treadmill time to fatigue test. And the thing about exercise, extreme exertion, is you can measure some muscle damage that occurs when you do heavy exercise. And there's something called creatine kinase, and it's a marker of muscle damage that you can measure in the blood. And we found that when drinking Tahitian Noni Juice, the amount of creatine kinase that you find in the blood after heavy exercise was reduced. So Tahitian Noni Juice was helping protect the muscles. So that helps with recovery. It helps with that endurance as well. So that's one of the mechanisms of action, and it's involving some of these antioxidant and inflammation processes I was talking about earlier. Sarah, how much time we got now? 2 minutes, okay. I won't get through all of this, so again, look at that paper. But here was a study we did in Chile, at the university in Chile, in Santiago, Chile. It involved cyclists. And we measured what's something called VO2 max, and that's a measure of fitness. It's a measure of how well you can use oxygen. And we saw that when the cyclists drank Tahitian Noni Juice, it improved their oxygen utilization. No surprise there. Fits into this energy and fitness thing I've been talking about. Now, one of the questions was about max and Encore and Pure. I'm going to address those really quick here. We did a study with Max and Tahitian Noni Juice, and we looked at anti-glycation effects and weight loss effects in obese patients. This was a 6-week trial, and this was done in collaboration with the Institute of Nutrition of the Russian government. So we actually had to do, again, a claim there related to making some officially approved health claim there, and we chose this problem to address. We found that actually drinking Max and Tahitian Noni Juice improved markers of these blood lipid markers, as well as improved weight loss. It actually helped people lose weight and keep the weight off longer than just calorie restriction alone. When you combine calorie restriction and Tahitian Noni Juice and Max, that actually helped reduce that, and it conserved muscle mass as well, so you could keep burning the fat. And Sarah, how are we doing? We're done now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're going to have to pull up here, Brett. I've just sent a chat to everyone saying that we think we're going to need to have you come back.
Okay.